Hey guys, really excited about today's episode with Colt McCoy, the Arizona Cardinals quarterback, the Texas Longhorns alum, and it's coming your way right now on Sports Spectrum.
This is Sports Spectrum, the intersection of sports and faith, where we bring Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
What's up, guys? Welcome to the show. I am Jason, and this is the Sports Spectrum podcast. We're so glad that you're tuning in and joining us for the show today. Make sure you check out our website, sportspectrum.com, for all of our content, including devotionals, podcasts, articles, stories, all day long on the intersection of sports and faith in Jesus Christ. Check it out at sportspectrum.com. Today's program is presented by Compassion International. We've been talking about the Fill the Stadium initiative now for just about a year or so, and I got to tell you, it's really working. We're talking about 70,000 kids that were left in desperate need of help because of the pandemic, because of everything closing, because of these concerts in large venues and events where kids could get sponsored. All were canceled in 2020 because of COVID-19. 70,000 kids were left kind of in the dark in desperate need of help. Well, Compassion and our pro athlete friends teamed up for this Fill the Stadium initiative to help fill what's essentially a 70,000 kids, a stadium's worth of kids who are left in poverty. And we are almost there, 70% of the way there in filling this stadium of 70,000 kids and releasing them from poverty. But the work isn't done. We need your help. You can donate right now. Food, education, medical care, vocational training. That's what's happening when you donate and help release these kids and their family from poverty. Check out fillthestadium.com to learn more and to donate today. Fillthestadium.com. This is a stadium that cannot remain empty. Colt McCoy is joining us today on Sports Spectrum, and this is going to be a great conversation with Colt. He's played in the NFL now. Can you believe he's entering his 12th season in the NFL? His 12th season. I mean, I think of Colt McCoy, and I still think of that baby-faced kid who played at Texas and had an unbelievable college football career, a two-time first-team All-American with Texas. His number 12 was retired. He was a two-time Heisman finalist in 2009. It's one of the most dominating college football players you'll ever see. He won the Maxwell Award, the Davey O'Brien Award, the Manning Award, the Johnny Unitas Golden Arm Award, the Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year Award. You can see how awesome he was in college. And then coming out of college, he got selected in the third round of the 2010 NFL Draft to the Browns. He played with the Browns, the 49ers, and then settled into a backup role with Washington for 6 years, from 2014 to 2019. He played last year with the New York Giants, and then this year, just this past offseason, signed a one-year deal with the Arizona Cardinals to back up Kyler Murray. And Colt McCoy, he's got a really interesting outlook, I think, on life and how God has worked on him from a identity perspective. Even though he's been a believer just about all of his life, he's gone through some ups and some downs and some difficult times, and he's very candid here on the show today. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I think you will too, with Colt McCoy, the Arizona Cardinals quarterback, joining us here today on Sports Spectrum. What's up, Colt? How you doing, man?
Hey, Jason. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be on here. All is going well. You know, the off season is always a fun time, and just started our virtual Zoom meetings with Arizona and trying to learn that offense and get ready to go.
Did it help that you were with a team last year for the first time, right, with the Giants, where you had to kind of do the same thing and learn an offense virtually? Did that help? Weirdly enough.
Yeah, I think so. That was such a weird time. I spent 6 years in Washington in the same system. Loved my coaches there, loved what we did, and went through kind of a tough injury and ended up signing with the Giants last year and had a great season. We were a few plays away from actually starting off really bad and then maybe making the playoffs. Really enjoyed it there. My family enjoyed it there. I'm excited. I'm excited about Arizona. I've known Cliff for a long time. I've always been intrigued by their system, and quarterbacks always play well there. So I'm kind of diving into it now, just getting into it, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, let's talk about Arizona for a second. How excited are you? I mean, kind of go into that, the details a little bit, wherever you, as deep as you want to go, just about signing with Arizona, coming to a team, like you said, with Coach Kingsbury, and just the excitement that surrounds, a team that's pretty stacked. Like, they got a really good offense. And I think when they're clicking and they're rolling, they were a tough out last year. Why don't you talk about your time, or your decision, I should say, kind of coming to Arizona?
Yeah, I mean, I think this was a challenge for anybody who was a free agent this year, just with COVID and the impact of the salary cap, and it was kind of tough. But I ultimately had some options and really felt like Arizona was the right place. It's hard when you go from team to team, and I certainly don't want to do that every year. But I do feel comfortable with the decision that I made, and they are, a good team. Everybody in the NFL is good, right? But on paper, you look at Arizona and some of the additions they had in free agency and sort of what they've done the last couple of years. Kyler's outstanding quarterback. Cliff's a great play caller. They've kind of tinkered with being 8-8 and really close, and maybe the ball bouncing their way a couple times. You never know what happens. So I'm really excited about it. I think we just had our first week last week together, and it was a great start. And so I'm just looking to go there and be the best version of myself every day that I can be to help our team, maybe take it over the edge a little bit. And I'm thrilled.
Colt McCoy is joining us here on Sports Spectrum. You're at a different season of life. It's so interesting. I look at your bio and I'm doing my research and I say, Colt McCoy is 34 years old. Really? I remember this kid in college at Texas, and you even came to ESPN, and I'll tell that story in a second. And you came into the league and you were drafted at 23 years old when you came to the NFL by the Browns. So I want to put this question to you. Different stage of life, obviously, now than you were when you came into the league. So what would 2021 Colt McCoy tell that 23-year-old Colt who was just getting ready to begin his pro career? When you think back now, like, what would be the big piece of advice or encouragement that you would tell your younger self now, knowing what you know, having been in the league for a decade?
Man, where do I start on this list, right? There's so many things.
Yeah. From
football to life to family. I was just immature. I mean, maybe thinking that you were mature going to the NFL, but you look back and it's just the things that you didn't know were just, and you couldn't know really. You got to kind of go through that. I consider myself very blessed from the standpoint that I know the lifespan of an NFL player is not 12 years. That I'm like me. I know that there was and has been a ton of more talented guys than me that didn't make it this far. And I also look back and think, man, if the ball would have bounced my way a couple of times here, I would be in a different position than I'm in right now as a backup. And I wouldn't be playing still if I didn't think that I could still play. So I'm in a great place, to be honest. I'm very thankful for what the Lord has done for me in my life. And as a competitor, though, you're always looking for that next thing. I think the biggest thing would be when I look back at my actual career, when I was young, I just tried to do everything perfectly. And I wore myself completely out to the point of I just didn't know if I wanted to go anymore because I wanted things to be perfect. I wanted to be perfect for my teammates and coaches. I wanted to win games. I just didn't ever want to mess up. And I wanted to put the time and the effort and the energy and hours to make sure that happened. It was a discipline all the time.
Yeah.
And I think now that mindset necessarily hasn't changed, but I understand that this game is unique in that there's ebbs and flows, there's ups and downs, there's momentum changes. And right now in the off season, I don't have to be throwing 150 balls a day to get ready for a game in September. Right. There's things that I can do, focusing mentally, studying the game. My approach is so dead on now, but it's also so different than what it was when I was younger. And I've just had to grow into that. And I'm lucky that I'm going into my 12th season and have the opportunity to do that. And, but I think anyone who plays this game is a competitor. You have to be, or it'll chew you up and spit you out really quick. But you have to channel that in the right way. And I certainly didn't know how to do that when I was younger.
The last game that you ever played with Texas was not one that you probably want to remember either, when you get hurt and, you're in the national championship game and it doesn't end the way Texas and I'm sure Colt McCoy wanted it to end. Think back to that person from a faith perspective, because I remember, and I've talked to the Acho brothers and a few others who were teammates of yours, and how impressed they were that you were still able to give God the glory and to stand firm, because you talked about your faith and how open you are. And even then I was so impressed at this, young man who had just suffered a devastating injury and, felt like if you hadn't, you might've had a shot, this and that. And yet you still were able to kind of praise God through that. And yet I think back and you said you were so immature and you were so young. How has that moment taken all the way to where you are now at 34 from a faith perspective helped you grow? Thinking about, I'm not caught up in this sort of identity driven life as a football player, but every single athlete I've ever talked to on this podcast, over 400 episodes or whatever it is, has said identity is like the number one struggle for them, because what they do is so out there publicly for everybody to see.
Right. That's exactly right. Everybody knows what you do. Everybody, when you walk in the room, everybody knows a little piece of something about you or think they know something about you when you don't know them at all.
Right.
But you're right. Like, that national championship was a really tough day in my life, right? You worked for something for so long to get to that point and then have it taken away like that. And really can't control injuries. 100% of the time we're going to get hurt. You just don't want it to be in that moment, right? That was the worst moment. But I think even as, I talked about immature or didn't really know or naive, we all have a foundation of who we are. And I think in that moment, I'm so thankful looking back on it now to understand that I knew what my foundation and purpose was, although the result wasn't what I would ever have wanted. I knew that my faith in Jesus and what he's done for me in the cross and my identity is that I am a football player, right? I get to do that. But if that's taken away, then that's God's plan and God's purpose. And I'm going to go and do what he wants me to do. And I'm thankful that in that moment, I handled it the way that I handled it, although I know it wasn't my flesh, if that makes sense. I know that I was so disappointed and so upset. And I don't think anybody understands the time and the effort and the decision to come back for your senior year and what it takes to win and go undefeated and get to that. I mean, I was sick to my stomach. I still get sick about it, but I understand that that was not the plan. I think I went through a lot of I don't want to call it depression, but times past that where I really struggled with it. And early in my career, when I was in Cleveland and went to San Francisco for a year and just knew that I was a better player than what the results were. For me, I think sometimes we can get so wrapped up in what the world views as success or the NFL or competition and time and discipline and all the things that you do that consume you in football. It's a full time, constantly in my head, and how do I get better thing? And if we don't balance that with just our understanding of who God is, what God wants us to do, what path he's taking us on, I think that it can kind of, the scales can start to tip a little bit. And so I reached a point a couple years ago when I broke my leg. I broke my leg on Monday Night Football against the Eagles in 2018. And then I basically missed the whole next year. And I went through this of, okay, I've played for 10 years. Hasn't really gone the way I would have wrote it out, but I'm thankful for it. is it time to walk away? And I realized at that moment just how much of an identity crisis I had in my life with football, because I've been playing football for so long. Football was everything for me. And to just say, okay, I think I might walk away, I couldn't deal with that. It ate me up to the point of many, many sleepless nights and tears and on my knees of just saying, okay, God, if this is what you want me to do, then let me walk through that door and let me be happy with it. Let me be thankful for it. And let me go seek out the next opportunity. But if it's not, then help me get back on my feet and understand that I've fully surrendered this game, and you can open a door for me and I'll go. But just whatever happens, make it super clear to me. And it was a long process of figuring that out. And I was working out and I was training and I was rehabbing my leg to get back to being able to give myself that chance to play if it was presented to me. And man, God just did a lot of really cool stuff in my life. And I really feel that I'm doing exactly what he wants me to be doing still. But I'm playing the game in a way that's a little bit different, in that I'm disciplined in my approach to the game and what it means to me and how I want to play the game and how I study and my interactions with teammates and coaches. And I love it. I love everything about it. But at the end of the day, I also know that I'm privileged to do it, and that this is what God is allowing me to do. And he could take that away at any moment. And if he does, I'm going to go that way. And I'm cool with that. And it's taken me a long time to get there, but I feel like this freedom of, man, I'm so excited to go play in Arizona this year. I can't wait to see what happens and how it goes. And I feel like I know personally that this is what God is wanting me to do. And I'm thankful that I sort of went through that valley or that hard time. And it seems like my career has had a bunch of highs and lows. But I'm really, really thankful for all of it, because a lot of times that's the only way we really grow.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing that. I got to imagine, even thinking about, there's got to be a moment where that hit you, right? Where you realize, man, I'm playing or I'm practicing or I'm doing this for a different purpose. And not that you weren't doing it for the right reasons before, but you just talked about just in the past couple of years after that injury, and you end up with the Giants last year. Was there a moment that you can think back to, or a particular moment? Maybe it was something gradual, but was there a particular moment? Maybe it was in a game where you were like, I see what was trying to happen, what was having to happen here. I see what you were doing, God. I see the work that needed to be done to understand that identity crisis that you alluded to. Was there a moment you can think back to?
Yeah, honestly, I think that I've been through it every year, right? You get so consumed by it that you kind of just push things aside, and it takes like this big something that happened in your life where you kind of step back and you don't even realize it, what you have done, but you've created this monster. And it's so easy to do. We're such competitors. We've been playing football our whole lives.
Yeah.
Everybody sees you as a football player, and that's who you are. And you want to live up to that brand. And I think, having a reset and that off season of, man, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And just getting in your word, praying, just those two things alone on a daily basis will allow you to stay connected, to understand exactly, which path I'm supposed to take and what I'm supposed to do. And again, this is a struggle for all of us, but especially for me. And it's something that I have to really on a daily basis reset myself and understand, look, I'm so thankful for what I get to do. It's like this gratitude, appreciation, but it's also deep down knowing that, hey, this is where God wants me today. And let's go be more like him today.
Let's take a quick break from our conversation here on Sports Spectrum to tell you a little bit more about Fill the Stadium and our friends at Compassion International. Now, you know about Compassion. They are the most trusted child development ministry in the world. All that they do is about children and releasing them from poverty. They do it all in Jesus' name. And now we have this Fill the Stadium initiative that's been going on for more than a year now, and we're making such amazing progress trying to fill 70,000 empty seats with children who are in crisis. 70,000 kids were left without an opportunity for food and shelter and clothing and all the basic necessities that children should have. Normally, they would get sponsored in a regular year, but the pandemic wiped all of that out. And so now you can come alongside myself, our friends at Compassion, our pro athlete friends, and help fill the stadium and release kids from poverty. You can go to the website, fillthestadium.com, to donate right now. Fillthestadium.com, and let's release these kids from poverty. Let's reach our goal of 70,000 filled seats. Go to fillthestadium.com. He is Colt McCoy, the Arizona Cardinals quarterback, joining us here on Sports Spectrum. So I want to share a quick story and then kind of get into leadership a little bit with you. I'm guessing you don't remember this. I will say that I prepped you a little bit before we started on this story. And it's one I wrote about in my book, The Uniform of Leadership, just because it stood out to me. I was a talent booker at ESPN. This is probably 2009. I think it was either during or right before your senior year had started. And I was assigned, along with a couple of the other talent producers at ESPN, to take you around. And the Texas staff was there around for a bunch of interviews, doing the ESPN car wash. For those listening, you just go show to show on all the different radio and television shows. And it's really a long day of interviews. And in the morning, we had gotten breakfast in the cafeteria, and I was walking with 2 gallons of milk. I have no idea why I had milk in my hand. I had no idea why there was gallons of milk at ESPN's cafeteria that day, but I had it, and I was bringing it to you guys, and you got up right away to help me and carry the milk and donuts or whatever else that I had, because I was clearly struggling trying to bring it all over to the table. And I don't know why, Cole, it sounds like a silly story in many ways, but that always stood out to me as someone that you saw a need and you jumped up and you helped. And, that displays leadership, because you were sort of for lack of a better word, the superstar that was there that day, the VIP that we were taking care of and taking you around. And, the staff was there. You were the first person to jump up and save me from what would I imagine would have been a milk disaster in Bristol, Connecticut at ESPN. To me, that's a wonderful leadership trait, though. And I had to include it in the book because I just thought, wow, that's about being others focused. So let's go into leadership a little bit. What does that mean to you when you hear a story like that? And your view maybe of how leadership should be as a person like yourself, who's played quarterback for so many years and viewed as a leader.
Yeah, well, I'm thankful that I helped you with that milk. We didn't spill it everywhere.
It would have been a disaster.
Yeah. No, I was very close with a guy at UT. His name was Frank Denius. The fields at the practice fields at UT are named after him. He was just an unbelievable guy. He stormed the beaches of Normandy when he was 17 years old, lived a very successful life, but was just a gentleman that I could talk to about anything.
Yeah.
And I was standing with him I don't go back to many practices or really haven't been back to a game in I don't know how long at UT. But at one practice several springs ago, we were standing on the sideline, and he looked at me. We were just watching practice, and he said, how would you describe leadership? What is a leader to you, Cole? And I sort of fumbled through, different things that, a leader is, he challenges other people, he handles himself in a good way. He's, he leads by example, like all these little things. And
yeah.
He kind of stopped and just kind of looked at me and he says, a leader is a man who can manage his own fears.
Wow.
And that has stuck with me for the last probably 5 or 6 years since that happened. And I think he's totally right. I think we have so many issues going on in our minds and our heads, especially as a quarterback. And until I can quiet those things down and soften my approach on my job and my responsibilities, I think at that moment, that sort of is leading by example, right? You're consistently approaching your job and your teammates and your day, and guys can be attracted to that. But I think before you can ever really make an impact on guys is not until you can manage your own fears and your own expectations and who the discipline to be who God has called you to be. And that's sort of in my head how I view leadership a lot of times. And there's not one way to do it. I've been around so many guys who do an unbelievable job at leading groups of people. And nobody does it the same. But for me, that's what I think about a lot.
Managing your own fears. I love that, because he's not saying you can't not have fears. Like, that's okay to be fearful or have those moments of apprehension or those moments of doubt, but to manage them well before you can go and manage others, right?
Exactly right. Exactly right. That's how I see it. And I think after being in a locker room for so many years, I think there's an attractive quality of being just genuine, just being authentic, being relatable, but being that consistently, where guys can see that play out over and over and over and sort of know what they're going to get from you when you walk in the door after a big win or after a loss. And I think that's an attractive piece of leadership as well.
What about as you've evolved into your NFL career, Colt? I remember talking to Drew Stanton. I remember talking to Dan Orlovsky, a couple of guys who were draft picks who came into the league, obviously wanting to start. You started your first few years and then kind of, settled into this role with Washington and now certainly with the Giants and Arizona as a backup, as a guy who can come in and mentor, as a leader, like we just talked about, as a guy who can be there and know when it's time, if he's called upon, he's going to come in and he's going to do the job. Talk about that mind shift that you've had to have, or maybe you haven't. I remember Drew Stanton said, I prepared, and Dan said this too, like every game I was going to start. And if I didn't, then I was going to be the best teammate I could be. But even though I kind of knew that I was being brought in as a mentor to Baker, which is what Drew Stanton said, right? To be there for Baker and to help him grow. I needed to know that, the NFL is not for long. There could always be an opportunity where I have to be ready. So it's not just about being a good mentor. Like, I actually have to play the game of football and believe in my abilities as well. Have you had a mind shift at all, or, a mindset that you've had to kind of reshift towards during your career? Or has it always kind of been the same for you since you came in the league?
I think Dan and Drew and those guys make great points. I mean, it's a lot of people talk about how being a backup quarterback is like the greatest job in sports, right?
Yeah.
And I don't disagree with them, but I do say that I think it requires just as much work or more, because at any moment you could go in and play in that game, and the whole team is going to expect you to play at a high level and win the game. And that's certainly what we expect of ourselves, but that's what our team has us there for. And for a lot of other reasons, right? Being good in the locker room, helping the starter. You've proved in the past that you can play. So if we need to count on you, we can. Like there's a lot of that. But the work that has to go in order to be prepared sometimes is even more than, because you don't get reps at practice. You're running the scout team. You're running the opposing team's offense.
Yeah. And
you're watching all the tape and studying the plays and what we're adding that week and their defenses. And and then you might do that for, I remember I backed up Kirk for 2 years and I never played. I didn't play in 32 straight games.
Right.
And that's a tribute to Kirk for staying healthy and playing great and all that. But, it could be years before something happens for you to play. And so it's tough, and you got to have something deep down inside of you that, you can, as a competitor, you can kind of quiet down and be very supportive of the team and the coaches and being a great teammate. And I think in many ways it helps you grow as a player and as a person, because you are out of your comfort zone a little bit, especially coming from, if you got to play a lot in college, like playing 4 years in college, and you go and you don't play, and you're kind of trying to figure out that role and what that looks like. And I think a lot of times it's very easy to be, or easier to be a leader when you are on the field and you're making plays and you're calling the plays to everybody. You're in constant communication with everybody, and everybody's kind of looking up to you. I think it's a lot harder to kind of take a back seat to that and still find a way to lead and to be an example and to be consistent in your approach and do all those things when you're not necessarily, in the spotlight.
Yeah, that's really good. Last couple of questions here with Colt McCoy on Sports Spectrum's podcast. Who pours into Colt McCoy now? What does discipleship look like for you? Staying connected to the Lord, as you're, not just a Christian, but certainly a father. You mentioned multiple kids, a husband. How do you stay discipled today? What's that look like for you?
I think that's crucial for everybody, especially for me. I have several close friends of mine that they are just so impactful to me and so helpful in so many ways. I'm so thankful for that. I should probably tell them more how thankful I am. But I tell you, football is a challenge. Football is hard. It's still fun, and I still love to play it, and that's why I'm still going. But having a wife and 4 kids and having that responsibility at home to love your wife and to nurture her and make her feel like, she's the most important thing, which she is. She's the glue to our family. And then being a dad to your kids and being there for them and helping raise them and be an example for them. And then playing football, it's hard. The league is getting younger as we get older. So there's challenges all over the place. And so for me, having some people in my life that really keep me accountable, also challenge me, also encourage me, has been a huge, huge blessing. A couple guys from my church here in Austin, from our small group, a couple pastors that I'm very close with in some of the cities that I've lived in. I'm grateful that they chose to or choose to pour into me, because I'm not sure if I could handle, all the things that we have to deal with without them. And they constantly steer me back towards the Word and towards Jesus. And I need that daily, to be honest. And I'm very, very grateful for that.
My last question for you, Colt McCoy, this has been great. Thank you so much for your time. Is a question I ask all of our guests. I'm curious what your answer might be. In the last year or so, we've been through a lot. We talked about your time with the Giants and just the year that was 2020. There's so much that goes with that. But there's lessons in those moments as well. You talked about the lessons that you learn, going through those difficult times and those difficult seasons. What's the lesson that God has taught you the most, or the one lesson that you think back to over the past year or so that sticks with you in terms of teaching you? God teaches us something new every day. What was he teaching you, or what has he been teaching you lately?
Great question. I want to answer it because it's right on the tip of my tongue. I think this quote has been with me since I started this off season. I read a book with a friend, and the quote was, "Discipline without direction is drudgery." And, we talked a lot about discipline earlier. We talked a lot about like your training and your focus and how much time you spend doing it. And to me, it's awesome, right? As athletes, as competitors, we know what discipline looks like. We only eat the right food. We only train a certain way. We drink a gallon of water. There's so many things that you can talk about when we go to bed early, get 8 hours of sleep.
Yep.
But I think for me, when I think of that quote, I think about godliness, and I think about being more like Jesus. My prayers used to be, help me be the best version of myself today. And now my prayers are more, help me be more like Jesus. And I think that's a big difference, because the goal of discipline is being more like him.
Right.
And, I think if our approach can change, I know for me, if my approach can, if I just walk along my day thinking discipline, it just weighs on you, and it's drudgery. But with the direction and focus of being more like Christ and more like him, we know we can never be that, because he's the only perfect one that's ever walked this earth. but we can strive to be more like that in the way that I'm a father, in the way that I'm a husband, in the way that I'm a brother, a friend, and then also in the way that I play quarterback. I think that has really been powerful for me this offseason as I sort of try to wrap my mind around that and really think about that. And I don't know, that's a quote that I think will be with me for a long time.
That's a pretty great quote. Can you share the book? Would that be okay to share the book for those listening?
Yes, it's an old book by Don Whitney, Spiritual Disciplines.
Okay.
And that's kind of how the book starts out. And it's I've had the book since January, and I don't know that I'm halfway through it. It's just one of those kind of books that just you read some things and you just kind of break down and pray and focus on, and a lot of simple things, but a lot of things that will reset you back in your walk and in your faith.
Oh, that's good. He is Colt McCoy, the Arizona Cardinals quarterback. Colt, thanks, man. This was really a great conversation. Wish you nothing but the best this year with Arizona. Hope you guys have a great year, and hopefully we'll get you back on again soon.
Hey, thank you. I was kind of all over the place as we started this. My kids are running around crazy out here, poking their heads in.
Oh, I would have loved to see the real life Colt McCoy.
Yeah, it's chaos, but it's great. I think we dialed in there towards the end. And again, I'm thankful to be on the podcast, excited about Arizona, and looking forward to this year.
Many thanks to Colt McCoy for joining us today on the show. This is an interview I've wanted to do for a while, and I'm glad we were able to get it done. And special thanks to my friend Sam Acho for the introduction. Sam was a teammate of Colt's with Texas back when they were in college together, and Sam made the introduction. And I just thought it was a really great conversation with Colt. And wasn't that ESPN story? I mean, it's kind of cheesy, the time I spent with Colt, but at the same time, it stood out. Just watching him serve, watching him step up and jump right up to help this tall, lengthy white dude trying to carry milk and donuts and all that. And he saved me from a really bad accident at ESPN. But at the same time, it just was a wonderful leadership trait. And I loved his take on leadership as well, managing your own fears. I just thought that was a really fascinating kind of look when you're thinking about yourself. Before you can pour into others, you got to kind of take care of what you're dealing with inside yourself first. And good leadership stuff there. Really great stories. And just appreciate Colt for being here on the show today. We also appreciate you for listening. We really do. Do us a favor, click that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode of Sports Spectrum. And then please do us a favor and tell someone, tell your friends, tell your family. Maybe you're a big sports fan. Maybe you're down in Texas listening to this. And the UT alums would love to hear from Colt McCoy. Man, please share this and let someone else know about the Sports Spectrum podcast. It makes a huge difference and helps us continue to grow our audience, to reach more people for Jesus Christ through the lens of sports, which is what we do here at Sports Spectrum. So thanks for tuning in. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you next time right here on the show. Have a great rest of your day. See you next time.